Well, it is card reveal season once again. So let's go ahead and start reviewing some of the new Forged in the Barrens cards. First up we have Shadowhunter Vol'jin. I don't really want to spend too much time on Vol'jin because this is the one card that we've been allowed to play with already. And I think we know it's a pretty good card. 5 mana 3/6, Battlecry, choose a minion, swap it with a random one in its owner's hand. So I've had some fun playing this. In like Hunter, for example, you bounce some random garbage token and then you pull out like a King Crush or a Dark Moon Tonk or something. But it's also good against the stuff that your opponent's doing as well. So if you're trying to kill your opponent and they have a Scrapyard Colossus in play, you just put the Scrapyard Colossus in their hand, they pull out some random garbage 2-drop, and you hit your opponent in the face to kill them, or you force them to spend 10 mana on this again. So yeah, Shadowhunter Vol'jin, it does good stuff for your own strategy, so it can be proactive. It's a good reactive card against what the opponent's doing. You can pretty much build around it to whatever extent you wish, and it's got pretty reasonable stats for its cost. So yeah, Shadowhunter Vol'jin is a pretty reasonable card that I think can be expected to see some amount of play going forward. Next up we have another neutral legendary, Blademaster Samuro. 4 mana 1/6 with Rush, and Frenzy, deal damage equal to this minion's attack to all enemy minions. So Frenzy is the first time that a minion survives damage. So you're basically going to rush this into something, you deal 1 damage to that, and then 1 damage to everything else. So in its base form, it's actually pretty comparable to Swipe. But instead of dealing 4 to a single target, you only deal 2, and you can't go face. Which looks kinda ugly. But compared to Swipe, instead of spell damage, you can use just minion buffs on this card. And I'm not really sure how efficient it'll be to buff this thing. This Embiggen caught my eye, but Embiggen is going to be rotating. Maybe this thing could end up seeing some play in Paladin. It's pretty good with the Library of Wisdoms, I guess. And then you can always, be cheeky and play Blessing of Might or something. Is Blessing of Might even going to be in the core set? So hard to remember. But you've also got like Hand of Adal, so Paladin has quite a few pretty good ways they could buff the Blademaster Samuro. Could be pretty nasty with Apotheosis. But a lot of these buffs, you're getting into like 3 mana territory, even with like Hand of Adal, which looks pretty good. That's still 6 mana. And at 6 mana, you're dealing like 3 AoE, which is, not the most impressive thing I've ever heard of. But if you are playing a deck that already has a lot of buffs in it, I think you can pretty easily just throw this guy in, and then, sometimes he lands a nice fat board clear, and that's pretty good. I do think the non-buffed base form of this card is, like, pretty bad, though. Like, Arcane Explosion isn't even really that good on turn 2, and this is turn 4. So you definitely do need to be buffing it, and just scrolling through all the buff cards, I currently don't really think this card is that well supported, outside of perhaps Paladin. And there are, of course, some like other fringe concerns with this card. If your opponent has a board full of like 6/1s, then this isn't even Arcane Explosion because it does actually have to survive the damage. So, yeah, I think Samuro's looking kinda sketchy. But if you happen to have a deck with enough buffs, it could be pretty good. Maybe Survival of the Fittest Druid, actually. That would be a pretty good buff for this guy. It's going to be a 5/10. The 10 almost always survives damage, and then you deal 5 AoE. That's a pretty good home for this card, maybe. And Druid could pretty reasonably play, like, maybe Ironbark or something to give this a little bit of extra oomph. Arbor up as well. So, okay, this card is pretty playable in Druid as well as Paladin. Maybe Samuro could actually end up being pretty decent. Next up we have Chain Lightning, rank 1. So Shaman spell, 2 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion and a random adjacent one. And then this upgrades when you have 5 mana, and again when you have 10 mana. So when you have 5 mana, this is still 2 mana, and then deal 3 damage to a minion and a random adjacent. And then when you're at 10 mana, it still costs 2 mana, but deals 4 damage. So even at its base form, I think this card is like pretty reasonable. You can compare it, as a shaman card, I guess you would compare it to Forked Lightning. But no overload, which is nice. Maybe a more appropriate comparison would be Cleave. And like, Cleave is a reasonably strong card. Hasn't really seen that much tier 1 level play. But Cleave is 2 random minions. Chain Lightning is targetable and then like semi-targetable. Shaman also uses the spell damage better. This thing also ranks up once you hit 5 and 10 mana. So I think it compares very favorably to Cleave. And probably favorably enough that it can see some play. One thing to keep in mind with this is that Shaman is losing the spell damage totem. But they're also getting a 1-drop that has pretty good stats and spell damage on it. So that might even be a net positive for a card like this. So yeah, pretty good, cheap removal. Easy access to spell damage in the class. Seems like quite a good card to me. Maybe the issue with it is that Shaman already has like Landslide, which is a pretty good card. They also have Lightning Storm. So like, maybe Shaman just doesn't need this removal card. But I think this card's probably better than Lightning Storm, at least depending on the meta. And it might be better than Landslide as well. I think Chain Lightning is a very solid card. I could even see potentially like an aggressive Shaman playing this, because it's just really efficient. Moving on, we have Bru'kan, a Shaman legendary. This is a 4 mana 5/4 with spell damage +3, but only 2 nature spells. So, spell schools, I believe they're called, are something coming with the next expansion. What was the card we just looked at? Chain Lightning is actually a nature spell. So that's a pretty significant synergy with Bru'kan. And Chain Lightning is a lightning spell. So I assume that means like Lightning Bolt, Lightning Storm are also going to be nature spells. So those are like pretty significant spells to be buffing with Bru'kan. Like if your finisher is just Bru'kan double Lightning Bolt, that's 6 mana, deal 12 damage. That's a very significant amount of damage to finish a game. With Lightning Storm, let me make sure I actually know what new Lightning Storm does. So yeah, it looks like new Lightning Storm just straight up does 3 damage, same cost, same overload, and it is in fact a nature spell. So that's a very significant AoE with Bru'kan, 7 mana, deal 6. But it looks like currently Bru'kan might be a little bit limited by the card pool. It looks like it's just Lightning Storm, Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and then Tidal Surge, which is a bit sketchy. So you've got like 3 good spells for Bru'kan, but they're all like really, really good with Bru'kan. So if you're playing all of those, I think you very easily just play Bru'kan in your deck. There is a bit of an issue though, like how many decks are you building that are playing both Lightning Storm and Lightning Bolt? They're kind of like opposing sorts of cards. But maybe with Lightning Storm being buffed, it's a lot easier to play in some sort of Lightning Bolt type deck. And with Bru'kan Double Bolt being such a strong finisher, maybe you play that in a bit of a slower deck than you would normally play Lightning Bolt in. So this guy looks pretty good. I think if Bru'kan gets like any more nature spells to play around with in this expansion, it's going to be looking pretty appealing to put into decks. Next up we have Peon. 2 mana 2/3, Frenzy, add a random spell from your class to your hand. So Frenzy, this thing does have to actually survive damage, which isn't that easy to do with 3 health. And comparing this to the last Frenzy minion we saw, this thing doesn't have Rush. So, seems like it's going to be pretty hard to consistently get the trigger off of Peon. I mean, if you just play it on turn 2, it's like barely likely to get it. But if this was just a battle cry instead of a frenzy, how good would it even be? 2 mana, 2/3, get a random card. I mean, like, that's fine. What would we compare that to? Like Questing Explorer? Questing Explorer is obviously a pretty strong card, but getting a random thing is a lot worse than drawing a card. And then on top of that, you don't even get the card every game. And there were some quest decks that didn't even play Questing Explorer. I guess maybe another comparison for the Peon would be like Wandmaker. More health on the Peon, which is nice. But Wandmaker pulls from a more limited spell pool, and you're never getting like a mind control that you can never play this game. And even ignoring the consistency of Battlecry versus Frenzy, there's also just like the speed of it, right? Like if you're playing Peon on turn 2, that's fine. But if you're trying to play, you know, Wandmaker on turn 6, then you can immediately play the spell. You can't really do that with Peon. So Peon is like maybe okay on turn 2 and exactly turn 2. Pretty hard for me to see this being played anywhere. But I admit I haven't done a super strong analysis of what 2-drops are surviving the core set. But it's kind of hard for me to imagine this being one of the best. Like Bone Chewer Brawler still in standard. That's just like such a better 2-drop. I don't think Peon is going to be very good. Next up we have Mankrik. 3 mana 3/4 Battlecry. Help Mankrik find his wife. She was last seen somewhere in your deck. So I believe the mechanic here is basically it just shuffles like a bomb or soul fragment type thing into your deck. And then when you draw it, you get a 3/10 that goes face. And the 3/10 doesn't have like rush or taunt or anything like that, so it's just a 3/10 and it deals 3 damage to the enemy hero. I mean, this thing starts off as a spider tank, so it doesn't need that much help. But if you're not like somehow built around drawing into this thing, you have to imagine like half the games you're not even going to find it, the other half it's coming down at like turn 8 or whatever. And even then the payoff is still a 3/10. It doesn't really seem like it does enough damage to pressure against control. It doesn't have any sort of keyword that helps against aggro. As I said, half the time you're not even going to find your wife. Seems like kind of a mediocre card. I do believe Stowaway is rotating. Yeah, Stowaway is Descent of Dragons. Like, if you could consistently hit this 3/10 on turn 5 with Stowaway, that would be pretty good, probably. But without some way to tutor this spell, I just don't see Mankrik really being worth playing. Apparently this card is very flavorful, though, which is nice. Flavor is not my thing, but some people appreciate it. Next up we have Razormane Raider. 5 mana 5/6, Frenzy, attack a random enemy. So 5 mana 5/6 is an okay amount of stats. With the Frenzy on this, if your opponent has like 2 3/3s and they're trying to trade into it, then sometimes this also just goes face and does 5 damage to them before they can trade off, which is like kinda nice. There's also the upside that if your opponent has like a 5/5 and 2 3/3s, then they trade the 3/3 in and sometimes you snipe the 5/5 and they take worse trades than normal. If you have like a bunch of 2 health minions and then play this thing, they consecrate to deal with all your other stuff and then they eat 5 damage. That's kinda good, I guess. But, I don't know. It seems kinda hard to imagine this really finding a slot in the deck. We've had some like pretty solid neutral 5 mana minions that haven't seen any play. Like, even Big Ol' Whelp has seen very fringe play. But I'm thinking more like Dalaran Crusader is a very sturdy 5-drop. We've always got like the classic Stranglethorn Tiger, which in a lot of ways is going to guarantee 5 damage better than the Razormane Raider anyway. And Tiger hasn't seen play in a while. I guess like Wasteland Assassin is even a card that you could maybe compare this to. There are definitely some certain scenarios where this card is powerful, but it seems like it's mostly a 5-mana 5/6. Sometimes it'll get a sneak attack in, but there are also like times where it's kind of bad. Like, I mentioned the Consecration example, but like sometimes your opponent can play, you know, some 4-power minion, and then they Consecrate, and then they found a way to kill this when they otherwise couldn't have. It just seems like a card that's not really doing enough to see play in Standard. But maybe I'm misjudging the power level of the post-core set Standard metagame. Next we have Sunscale Raptor for Hunter. 1-mana 1/3 Beast. Frenzy, shuffle a Sunscale Raptor into your deck with permanent +2/+1. So, from what I'm gathering with this card, it's a 1/3, and then it survives damage, you shuffle in a 3/4. If that 3/4 survives damage, you shuffle in a 5/5, and then a 7/6, a 9/7, etc. So your 1-drop can theoretically go infinite. But how good is that really? Your 1-drop survives damage. I guess you're probably playing Aggro Hunter if you're playing a Dire Mole. And then on average on like turn 6 or something, you draw a 1-mana 3/4. I mean, 1-mana 3/4 is good, but it's not really that good on turn 6. And if you're playing that sort of Hunter deck, how often is it ever getting bigger than 3/4? Probably almost never. So I actually don't really think the Frenzy on this card is that strong. And as a 1/3, like, how often are you even getting the Frenzy out of this in the first place? Probably not super often. But like, even when you do get the Frenzy, it seems like maybe even a downside, drawing some random stat minion later on. Although maybe I'm just completely misjudging what Face Hunter is going to look like going forward. Or Aggro Hunter, I should say. Because it looks like Kill Command is not in the core set. Eagle Horn Bow is also gone. So maybe the deck isn't as burn heavy as it used to be. In which case drawing some like stat thing later in the game is a little bit better. But even in that case, I would still way rather be drawing into like Savannah Highmane on turn 6 rather than 1-mana Spider Tank. But maybe you don't care about the Frenzy on this card. Maybe you just go old school and you play it because it's just literally a Dire Mole in most of your games. And Hunter loved Dire Mole when Dire Mole was in Standard. But the thing about Dire Mole is that at the time Hunter had Crackling Razormaw. And Crackling Razormaw was a really, really good card. And Dire Mole was the best way to guarantee the Razormaw on turn 2. Currently, it doesn't really look like we have a strong, like, 2-mana beast-specific follow-up to this Raptor. And if we look at current Face Hunter, I think it has, like, plenty of other 1-drops it can be playing. We are losing Dwarven Sharpshooter, but there's Wolpertinger has a good Hunter option, and then neutral options. There's Intrepid Initiate, which isn't going anywhere. There's also Tour Guide. And yeah, Demon Companion, which I scrolled past. So, like, Hunter already has a bunch of good 1-drops. I don't really know if they need a Dire Mole with some sketchy text on it. But maybe this isn't an Aggro Hunter card. Maybe there's, like, some sort of way to go infinite with this and do some really cheeky shit. We are getting Dire Frenzy back in Standard with the core set. This doesn't really have direct synergy with Dire Frenzy, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to be able to keep both buffs. Maybe you can, like, stack the buffs between these, but, like, even then, you really want Dire Frenzy to be hitting a more significant minion. But maybe it's not, like, direct synergy with Dire Frenzy. Maybe Dire Frenzy is signaling some sort of archetype that's going to see support, some sort of, like, Shuffle Hunter. And in Shuffle Hunter, maybe the Sunscale Raptor is, like, really strong. But currently, this card looks like Dire Mole, and Dire Mole's not quite as impressive as it used to be. Next we have Druid of the Plains. 7 mana 7/6 for Druid. With Rush and Frenzy transform into a 6/7 Kodo with Taunt. So this card is really powerful. The idea is basically for 7 mana, you deal 7 damage to something and then you get a 6/7 Taunt. Which, I mean, if you compare that to like Firelands Portal, or there's probably a more contemporary example, but compare that to like Firelands Portal, that's a super high roll off Firelands Portal, and it does more damage. So a very, very strong looking card. And also, if I'm not mistaken, the core set is bringing back like Menagerie Warden. Yeah, so maybe some nice beast synergy to go with this card as well. There's also like a new card that draws a beast from your deck, which is really good with this. So yeah, this card looks very efficient. It's also, I do believe Overgrowth is still going to be in Standard for another year, right? Yeah, Ashes of Outland. So at 7 mana, it curves really nicely off of Overgrowth, which is something that Druid doesn't really have since Guardian Animals got nerfed. So yeah, Overgrowth into Druid of the Plains seems like it could be a very common curve going forward. I will say though that for a Frenzy minion, 6 health isn't really a ton. Like, there are definitely some things you could be trying to kill with this that would have more than 6 power, and it wouldn't survive for the Frenzy. But in general, seems like there's not that much stuff with 6 or more attack. This card is probably going to be at its worst against like Paladin, because they play like Libram of Hope, or they can buff up all their stuff to have 6 power with the Libram of Wisdoms. So like maybe in that matchup, this card wouldn't be that impressive. But I do think in general, this card is going to be a high-rolled Firelands Portal that you can ramp into, which sounds pretty freaking strong. Next up we have Imp Swarm. So this is another ranking up spell that improves the effect at when you have 5 mana and then when you have 10 mana, but the cost does not go up. So anyway, for Warlock, this is 2 mana, summon a 3/2 Imp, and then when you have 5 mana, it's 2 mana, summon 2 3/2s, and then at 10 mana, it's 2 mana, summoned 3 3/2s, I believe. Yes, 3 3/2s. So, when you have 2 mana, it's Bloodfin Raptor. When you have 5 mana, it's like it's like a doubly efficient Bloodfin Raptor, but you're still making Bloodfin Raptors on turn 5. And like, what deck are you really playing this in? Like, I guess if you want Bloodfin Raptors, you're playing Zoo, but like, this card's not playable on turn 2 in Zoo. I mean, it is, but you feel really bad paying 2 mana for a 3/2 in Zoo. And with Life Tap, I don't know that you really necessarily need cards that continue to be like as efficient getting up to those mana costs. So, I don't know. Card seems... I mean, not much analysis here, but this card just kind of seems like crap. Seems like I don't want to be playing this in any archetype. Even when it's like super upgraded, it's just like at a point in the game where the effect doesn't really do anything. Seems like kind of a garbage card. Next up we have Desperate Prayer for Priest. 0 mana, restore 5 health to each hero. A pretty boring effect. Also worth noting that Flash Heal is going to be in the core set this year. So you could pay 1 mana and restore just 5 health to your hero instead of 5 health to both heroes. But maybe as a priest you don't really care about that. Maybe just 0 mana heal 5 is... I mean, that is a very significant amount of healing. The issue is that it's like low value. And I don't know, it's a little bit difficult to say how much Priest cares about that. It depends a lot on the archetype of Priest. And Priest is probably going to be like the most difficult class to evaluate with all the core set stuff changing. One place that this could see play is in a Miracle Priest with Auctioneer. I'm pretty sure Auctioneer survived the core set rotation. And Miracle Priest is already kind of a thing. So yeah, this is good in the deck with Auctioneer and Nazmani Bloodweaver. Not sure if that'll be a deck, but if you're just trying to Miracle into Cthulhu or some other win condition, then you don't really care that you heal your opponent for 5, because they're still just going to die anyway. So yeah, actually a surprisingly interesting card. If you care about 0-cost spells, you're definitely happy to play this. But even if you don't care about those, it's still pretty nice to play in some sort of Control Priest. Although I guess Control Priest is losing Galakron. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Control Priest can afford to play something like this going forward. They are keeping Sethic Veilweaver though, which is a pretty good infinite value thing. I don't know, definitely could see some play. And I think for this video we're going to end on Spirit Healer, which is a neutral 4-mana 3/6. After you cast a holy spell, give a random friendly minion +2 health. So it's pretty hard to evaluate this without knowing the holy spells. So yeah, it looks like holy spells are exclusive to Paladin and Priest, so this is a dual class card. Can I... Yeah, I can just go ahead and show this actually. So yeah, these are the holy spells that have been announced so far. Some of them are new, we haven't gotten to those yet, but that's okay. But just looking at these holy spells, like how often am I playing Holy Light and needing to give one of my minions +2 health? Not really very often. Equality Consecration don't really seem like they pair well with this card. I don't think I'm ever really playing like Flash Heal or Desperate Prayer and trying to buff one of my friendly dudes. It seems like with most of these spells, they're not really positioned in such a way where I need to like cast the spell and I want to buff one of my things, and I also have Spirit Healer in play. Probably the most like reasonable set of spells with this is going to be the 2 Paladin Secrets, Avenge and Reckoning. So if you're playing some sort of like, you know, Secret Paladin that cares about board tempo and all that stuff, then maybe you could get some pretty significant buffs out of this card. But like even then, how many buffs do you need for this card to be worth playing? It's a 4-mana 3/6, which is like a very mediocre stat line. Say you get +2 health out of it, then like on turn 5 with your Avenge, you're able to play a 4-mana 3/8. I don't know, seems pretty underwhelming. And in Paladin specifically, if you're buffing like a 1/1 recruit, then that's pretty garbage. I don't know, it's just hard for me to imagine a deck that plays enough holy spells to justify this, and often enough finds themselves in a situation where they like have a board and want to cast holy spells, and on top of that where this effect is like actually impactful enough. So yeah, I think I gotta say the Spirit Healer doesn't look very impressive. I mean, theoretically, if they make a bunch of like Desperate Prayer type cards, then you can just, on turn 4, play a bunch of 0-cost holy spells. But like even in that sort of deck, you don't care about just buffing some random thing +2 health. So yeah, pretty hard for me to imagine this card seeing too much play. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. These were the 12 cards that were like first shown a week or however many ago. And I'm definitely going to try to keep on top of things and probably try to do like a daily review video. So yeah, if you're interested in that, go ahead and subscribe for more of these.